Hello everybody and welcome back. It's been a couple of weeks since we've managed to do a live stream because finally, I guess, travel got in the way of the schedule. Now, a couple of people have said they're not joining because the football's on, so sorry for clashing with the football if that is the case. So welcome everybody, a couple of introductions and things before we get going. We're doing this live stream on a Sunday because I only got back from the cruise yesterday. Remember that the entire content of this is going to be driven by the comments that people leave, the questions they ask, although we will focus a lot on the Viking Venus, my first cruise back after 15 months of shutdown, but there's already some other questions there more generally on cruising, so we'll touch on those as well. If you're watching this after the event, thanks so much for doing that. And remember, you can just skip through, don't just drop out, keep skipping through because there'll be lots of gems and questions that people ask. People, of course, come and go. So it's great to see so many people here. I've lost my glasses. Cruise calories don't count. I thought that would be very appropriate for as we head back cruising. The good news for me anyway is I managed to eat like crazy as you do on a cruise. I did loads of exercise, loads of walking around the ship, and I came back slightly less weight than when I boarded, which was a major, major shock. Maybe I'll get some caught up. So anyway, cruise calories clearly don't count. So I ate really fantastic food, had a great time. So first of all, let's get stuck straight in. Loads of people from all around the world here. A big shout out to those of you, a couple of other people who have YouTube channels. Paul and Carol Love to Travel. I was actually just watching their videos because I'm heading off in a week to go on Saga Spirit of Discovery, in fact today, and I was watching a video they'd done of a cabin type that book. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Cruise Show UK, which it popped up here somewhere here. I met the Cruise Show UK on board Viking Venus. They've just started a YouTube channel as well, and they already posted loads of stuff about Viking Venus, so that's great. So here we are. As I said, leave a comments there and I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next 60 minutes. So let's talk a little bit about Viking Venus and what some initial impressions were, and then I'll leave it up to, I'll leave it up to the questions. So as I mentioned, Viking Venus, sorry, I've also reminded myself I need to slow down. As people keep commenting, I talk too fast. Let's give a couple of thoughts about Viking Venus. Somebody had asked straight up right from the embarkation process, what in fact was it like? At least I can find that a question around what Portsmouth was like. Now, for those of you who in the UK, Portsmouth, or not in the UK as well, Portsmouth has not traditionally been a major cruise port, and they have tried to build a whole cruise business over the last couple of years. Most of the cruise business sails out of Southampton, of course. Dover is very key. And then in the region, you've got places like Liverpool and so on. So Portsmouth have been trying very hard, and they had Viking selling out there. They also have, I think it's tomorrow or tonight, Scarlet Lady arrives. Scarlet Lady will be selling also out of Portsmouth. Now, the system in Portsmouth is quite an interesting one. The check-in process, it's as with all these new post-pandemic cruises, you choose a very specific time period and you show your various documentation, you show your proof of vaccination on your NHS app or letter that you've got from the NHS through 119, and then you check in. Now, it was such an incredibly fast process because they've staggered everybody across the day. So my check-in slot was 9:30. I got there straight up to the desk, which was doing all the checking in. They checked all my NHS stuff, asked me the health questions, went to the check-in desk where you did the usual stuff where, they confirm your credit card, they hand over your tracking device, your contact tracking device, straight through security. You then board a bus. Now, because it's a working port, there's a lot of ferries coming in and out of there. You can't walk to the ship, so you have to get bused to the ship. You then get on the ship, you get sent straight to the theater where you get shown how to put on your life jacket. You then go straight up to your cabin where you watch a video on the muster drill. You push a thing at the end, which confirms that you've watched it. So I arrived at the port just after 9:30. I was in my cabin watching my video by 9:45. So I was in my cabin by 9:45. Also, what you do, importantly, there is you then do your COVID test in your cabin. Now, what Viking do is they have a laboratory on board, and it's a saliva test. So it's that new saliva technology test. So you basically spit in a test tube thing, and you'll see eventually when the video comes out how that all works. You spit in a test tube thing, and one of the things I discovered was it's actually quite hard to spit. But because we had the test every single day, we all joked amongst ourselves, we all became experts at the spitting test. But you actually have to fill up this little vial thing. We left it, it was fetched, and they did the laboratory test. Now, during that whole time, you're now in your contact tracing device, you're allowed to move around the ship, you don't have to stay in your cabin. Of course, you're reminded all the time that you have to stay socially distanced. All the bar areas, all the restaurants have seats blocked out, so to remind you of that. And then eventually you get your test. Now, certainly what seems to have happened, now bear in mind it's an entirely vaccinated cruise, what seems to have happened, and it happened on the cruise before, is we were due to set sail. We didn't set sail on time because they were, kind of the words where the captain said, they're verifying results. What I actually did notice a little bit later is they disembarked a passenger or two. So there's one passenger left, maybe a second passenger. I'm assuming that they did not pass the COVID test because they would do a second COVID test if you fail that, and they were basically disembarked, and then we set sail. But every single day we had that COVID test. Every single day we had to fill out a health questionnaire on the app, and every single day we had to have our temperature taken, and it was just a little kind of a smart device. And if you didn't do those, you got a reminder that you had to have this done. So I certainly found it extremely reassuring that every day everyone was being tested, everyone was having their temperature taken, and you had the health questionnaire. We only called on 2 ports, and you could only leave the ship on bubble excursions, again, very socially distanced, quite small. One of the big downsides, I think, of the cruise was, in fact, you're not going for the excursions. Although I did actually book one of the, you had included excursions on Viking, you then could have some add-on ones that you could pay for. The basic excursions were pretty dull, to be honest. You basically sat on a bus and drove around and got off on a beach. So that was pretty dull. But I did actually then, so I bought some of the excursions, and they were going to places when the public weren't. So we went to this beautiful country home where there was no other public. It was just us on the tour, and there was actually 3 or 4 of us actually on the tour. So that was a little bit dull. So you're not going to the ports. Now, what's going to be very interesting in the cruise I'm going on Saga in a week's time is we have a port every day, and again, it's the same issue. So that's just a little bit about some of the process there. So I'll just check and see if anyone asks me specific questions on Viking Venus, and then I will I'll talk a bit more about some of the other key things that that had. Very kindly, Barry saying, good to have you back. Last weekend was not the same without you. I hope you enjoyed the cruise. Thank you very much for that. One of the things that was fantastic, and I say this all the time, is it's great that people watch the videos, which is really fantastic. It's also fantastic that people come regularly, like Andy and Kirsty and stuff, join, Paul and Carol join every week. But it was also really, really fantastic. On this cruise, there was at least 8 sets of people that watch the channel or take part in the live streams that were on board the ship. And that was really, really fantastic to get to meet people. So remember, if you're ever on a ship that I'm on, please, please, please come and talk to me. It's been really, really great. So let me answer the question, which is which I think follows on from what I've said so far. A couple of asking is, how much has cruising changed during the pandemic? And Ken's asking, what's different now cruising versus pre-COVID? Now I'm going to do a whole video which I've recorded about that, and that will hopefully come out, say, in a week or so, which gets into that in a little bit more detail. But one of the fundamental differences, I think, is obviously, sorry, let me talk about the things the same. Probably the most important thing that struck me about a post-COVID cruising is it's still an amazing experience, because you still are out at sea, you still have sea days, you still have oceans, you still have entertainment, you still have incredible food. The event is a little bit dialed down, if you like, because a lot of things, certainly under the rules at the moment, you can't do. Now, this is starting to differ a lot by country. So if you watch some of the things that are happening with cruises, say out of Greece, for example, or those selling out of the Caribbean, or that will be selling out of the US, and we'll come and talk about the US but later, a couple of questions on that, is it really varies based on the rules. So the rules at the moment in the UK, for example, had that thing where we had to wear masks indoors, even though it was vaccinated. Other cruises and other places don't have to do that. Now, I actually thought the mask thing would get in the way. However, once you're seated, drinking, eating, whatever, you can take the mask off. There was a cocktail party towards the end, particularly late in the cruise. I guess it was more reassured that everyone had been passing the test, which was held without masks outdoors. So it was out on a beautiful day on the pool deck. So but generally speaking, it's a bit dialed down. So there's things like there was no dancing, for example, which is not allowed. So the entertainment is a little bit dialed down. You're not going to have competitions where people are interacting, like table tennis competitions, things like that. But there was still a lot of things to do. So there was a shift, perhaps from those kind of activities into a little bit more enrichment type stuff. What was a big concern, two big concerns that people had raised with me that I was particularly sensitive to or aware of, was, first of all, a lot of people go on the cruise, and one of the important things is meeting people, both meeting the crew and getting a chance to talk to them, get to know them, which is always great, and of course meeting other people. I would say without a shadow of a doubt that I probably met more people on this cruise than I've met on any other cruise that I've been on. And that could also be the fact that it was smaller, it was reduced capacity, people were just so excited to be back, and people made more of an effort. But I definitely met more people and spoke to more people than I have ever done on a cruise before. Now, I'm not naturally a particularly gregarious person, but loads of people come up to you, they start talking to you. You'll be sitting in the restaurant, because although you're sort of a distance apart, people will start talking to you. So the good thing about cruising is going out and being at sea, it's still there. The incredible food is still there. People wanting to talk to people is still there. So I actually did a couple of nights with different people, because you were allowed to do that under the rules. You could have up to 6 people. So that was the same. Sorry, I mentioned about the mask thing. So the masking didn't get in the way, because once you were seated down at a bar area, so although there might be 2 seats blocked off between you, the people are over there and you can talk to them. At dinner, you can talk to them. When you're at the swimming pool, your mask comes off when you're outdoors on the deck. So often we would just start chatting to people out on deck and stuff. So some of those things that were really, really important were still there. And in fact, there were, of course, reminders that what things like on land, the mask on and off, the COVID test every day, the health checks, the temperature and stuff. But actually, I didn't find it got in the way, because talking to people, I think I was talking to David also from the cruise show, is it just became part of your routine, part of what you did in the morning. You got up in the morning, you did your test, you went out to breakfast, you did your temperature thing, you did your health screening, and then you were done for the day and got on with it. I think the one thing that of the overall experience was the ports were a challenge. They were kind of disappointing in a way. And I think not being able to get out and just explore in a port, that is a downside. So like I said, for my Saga cruise, I'm absolutely definitely going to focus on choosing excursions which are perhaps more hiking or something like that, because sitting on a coach is not really for me. That I think was less a good experience. That was probably a good experience overall. And a thing which is specific to Viking, I loved Viking. I loved my cabin on Viking. I had a very nice cabin. I'd splashed out and got a nice suite on there, so I'd gone a little bit over the top. So first one back, I liked Viking. I liked the quality of the ship. I liked the food, the range of food, the crew, the service. The only thing that I would probably score lower, which I did actually in the survey, was I thought the shows and the entertainment were not great. They were pretty average, because a lot of the stuff that Viking do is pushing the boundaries, trying different things. They try and do things a little bit differently, but the entertainment were those classic review shows. There was a 60s songbook, there was a Beatles songbook, and there was an ABBA songbook. And it was a talented cast, a nice band, but it was pretty not my cup of tea. So that was the one disappointing thing. Mark saying, I think probably picking on my slow down, my slow down reminder is thank you. I have a voice, but I think you're right. I think I get overexcited and I talk really fast. It's good to hear. So let's, I'm sure I've probably skipped loads and loads of questions. So I will zoom back and get to those. I'll keep going with Viking Venus, and then I'll come back to the more general questions. So Lou's saying he's looking forward to hearing my Viking experience. Hopefully that's helped, as is Hetty. I'm going to come back to Brad's question on the US. So let's have a look. There was a couple of questions. I'm going to come back to questions on thing. So the JM129, good to hear from you. Is there an APT comparison between Viking and the other cruise line? Now, I'm not sure what APT comparison is, so I probably need to clarify that. I'm not quite sure what you're asking on that, but maybe it's what's inclusion, because somebody asked me on inclusion, so I'll talk a little bit about the inclusion. So let me find that question. Someone asked me a question around what Viking includes and doesn't include. So let me answer that. I won't bring it up. So basically what Viking does, it's a much more all-inclusive line. So on this particular cruise, what was included was obviously all the food's included, but what's important is all the specialty dining is included. So they have a couple of specialty dining restaurants. They've got Manfredi's, which is the Italian, which interestingly is actually named after one of the original founders of Silversea, who the owner of Viking is very friendly with, and the Chef's Table, which is a series of set menus. So we had an Oriental one, we had a British menu one, and then there was a California one. And those are completely included. You just have to book those. Now for us, because it was reduced capacity, we could go basically as many as you want. So actually one of the followers on the channel who I met, him and his wife, I think ended up going to the Chef's Table every single night, and it was fantastic. You then have the restaurant, which is the main dining room. You had World Buffet, which had amazing sushi in really good food. So they had a smaller choice than you would probably have on other cruise lines, but really, really good quality. You also had, during the day, you had two other venues, which was Momensen, I think that's how they pronounce it, which is named after their grandmother, which is more Norwegian type food during the day. And then you have the pool grill with burgers, and then you have room service. So all of those options are included. So unlike other lines, they're not, but probably equivalent, like if you look at Oceania, whereas Amara, which is probably close competition, their specialty dining is included. Gratuities are now included for the ocean voyages. So that was included within the price. Wine and beer and soft drinks are included at lunchtime and dinner. You can then buy a drinks package if you want other drinks beyond that. You get one excursion in every port is included. As I mentioned on these, they were probably not the most exciting cruises because they just had to keep everyone in a bubble and pretty much just going on a coach and to walk on the beach or something. but you have, normally in Viking, you have an excursion included. So, and Wi-Fi is also included. And the Wi-Fi was pretty good. I thought it was okay. And I discovered it was probably better than I thought, because I certainly saw at the cruise show, they uploaded a couple of videos they made on board. So that was pretty impressive. Although what they say is the Wi-Fi is only really good for, not for streaming, that they discourage streaming. So that was key. So that's kind of what it includes. So when you look at the fares, Viking fares are a little bit on the higher side. It's a ship of about 930 passengers. But once you do all the net, it's probably not that much more expensive than, say, in Oceania, but at tomorrow, once you bundle everything in from there. So there was the cruise show. As I mentioned, they've got quite a lot of stuff on Viking Venus, but of course you can watch those, but don't forget to watch out for my Viking stuff coming soon. Wow, this is good. Sheila's saying you want to cruise, which is good. Of course, I'm addicted to cruising, and it's great if I can get more and more people. Quite a few questions about Carnival. So about Cunard. So a little side swing to talk about Cunard. I guess there's a lot of questions on Cunard because I did a video last week, the week before last, about Cunard and why whenever I go on vacation with Mark, we always go on Cunard, and I can't get him off Cunard. So quite a few questions on Cunard. So Carmen, it's great to know that you found that. Probably the process of trying to convince Mark not to go on Cunard, that it got on Cunard. So a couple of questions to you ending up on Cunard. I really do like Cunard, and I was really disappointed because I had a Cunard. I'm doing one of the short cruises on Cunard, one of their startup cruises on Queen Elizabeth on the 23rd of July, which I know Kirsty and stuff are going to be with, so a chance to meet them. I was due though to go to the Norwegian fjords on Queen Victoria in September. That's been cancelled because Cunard are now only going to have Queen Victoria coming back to service in April 2022. Cancelled the World Cruise, of course you've probably seen that, and they're now going to be running some transatlantic and Caribbean stuff on Queen Mary 2, and Queen Elizabeth is basically going to do kind of UK stuff and environments until it goes to Australia later in 2022. So there's a bit of an aside on Cunard. So a couple of questions on Cunard. Steve asked, any date on when the sales are open on Cunard's new ship? He's been on all the new Queen's maiden voyages, very nice, so you definitely want to do that one. Starting with Queen Mary 2 in 2004. I don't have any updates. The ship is due next year, but they haven't said anything at all. And I guess that's because they're so caught up at the moment with just trying to sort out all the complexities of cancelling world cruises and stuff. So I haven't heard anything. Last I heard, the ship was on track. So I guess, so I don't know anything, but certainly, I think getting on that maiden voyage is going to be really, really popular. And I'm really intrigued to see what they're doing with that ship and how they're going to kind of move things forward on that. Somebody had asked the question is, can you rent dinner jackets on Cunard, and what is the cost for dry cleaning? Now, Andrew, can't remember exactly the cost on dry cleaning and the laundry side. Now, certainly it's better. Certainly they didn't used to rent out dinner jackets. You had to take those. And I guess maybe even so now with all the COVID stuff and people chopping and changing, maybe it's more complex. But of course, what you can do is take just a suit. Don't actually take the dinner jacket, tuxedo. We were actually in a discussion around, are we going to take both if they have a formal night? And I think we probably will do, because it's a fly dry cruise. But at the last time I checked, you couldn't do that. So let's have a scroll through. Lou's talking about cruise calories don't count. Lou's got quite a few cruises coming up, and I definitely hope they don't count. I'm really concerned a little bit about this whole period, because I went a little bit overboard on these return cruises out of the UK, and I still have 6 more of those to do. And so trying to manage calories is going to be really important. I think probably looking at Richard and Helen, who have Visit with Richard and Helen channel, were on the same Viking cruise, and they were talking about how they perhaps weren't as lucky as me. One of the things I do is I don't drink any alcohol, so I think I have a slight advantage from that front, because I guess if you start having all those beautiful wines that were included, that kind of piles up. So here we are. Peter Jones saying we love Britannia class on Cunard. Certainly, someone asked a question about the different classes. I'll see if I can find the question about the different classes. Just there are 3 classes on Cunard. You've got Britannia, which actually has Britannia Club as well, Princess, and you've got Queen's Girl. So Britannia is what the bulk of the cabins are. It includes everything from inside, ocean view, and balcony cabins, and it has a it has a fixed dining, so you have an early dining and a late dining session, and you get allocated to a table, and you sit with your various travel partners or people that you're allocated with if you've asked for that. Britannia Club has a certainly separate dining room, depending on the ship. If it's on Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, it's a whole separate dining room, or it's a separate space. They have open-seated dining. You then have Princess Grill, which has their own restaurant, open-seated dining, which you have your own table. Queen's Grill, open-seated dining, which you have your own table. One of the most impressive rooms of all on the Cunard ships is the Britannia dining room. It's a really magnificent 2-level, beautiful Art Deco style room, and so a lot of people absolutely love eating in Britannia. It's and the interesting thing with Queen Mary, particularly if you're doing the transatlantic, is I always say to people, if you want to do a transatlantic on Queen Mary, you can, almost irrespective of your budget. So if you have $1 gazillion or pounds or euros, you can spend an absolute fortune and go in one of the Q1 cabins, Q2 cabins, and that'll cost you $30,000 or something per person to cross the Atlantic. But you can also, depending on the time of year, you can get an inside cabin for a couple of $100s. In fact, it costs more to take your dog with you in the kennels on Queen Mary 2 and transatlantic than many of the actual cabins, as a little aside, if you're ever looking at taking your dog with you. So Lou's asking a question, good question, Lou, on the capacity on these sailings. So the UK has a rule which has been extended. So it was due to end tomorrow on the 21st. Stage 3, we're due to go to stage 4. That stage 4 has now been moved right back to the, I think it's the 19th of July now. So under stage 3, cruise ships were only allowed to sail with 1,000 passengers or 50% of normal capacity, whichever is the lowest. So what Viking were doing is they were capping it at a maximum of 50%. Now, what they've actually been doing, from what I can gather from people being on the cruises and also sort of sussing out what the Viking people were saying who were on board, is they started lower than that and they've sort of built up, but they are selling less than the 50%. So I think we had 400, just around about 400 on our selling. Now, what's really important for those in the UK will know is because stage 3 has been pushed back a month, all those cruises like the Saga one I was on, for example, I'm on Saga Britannia, which were all happening before the 19th, they have had to cancel a number of guests. So a lot of them were moving from 50 to 60 to 70 or even up to 80% capacity, but they're only allowed to sail on those sailings before the 19th of July at low capacity. So actually my Saga cruise has reduced capacity. So both those two cruises, I wasn't sure if I was actually going to be on that I've got. Good news was my agent, Sarah, who's also going to be on that cruise actually on Saga, was able to confirm on Friday that I'm definitely on that sailing. A lot of people that I know who are on that sailing are still waiting to hear. They're only going to find out on Monday. Bear in mind the cruise goes on Sunday, and on Britannia it appears that I'm on as well. But a lot of people have been cancelled at Britannia. So those of you who know Ben and David, who have a YouTube channel, they were due on Britannia the day I was getting on Saga. Theirs was cancelled when they reduced back that capacity. So Lou, it's 50%. What I'm not sure of is, because they have a couple more to go, I think they're basically sticking at the 50%. Now, once you get to the other ones, like we've started in Greece and Bermuda, and I guess in Malta, it's slightly higher. Now, I'm not 100% sure what it is actually. One of the things that, building on Susan's point, booked a Viking cruise, which is now next year. So very interesting to hear you. So hopefully, Susan, so far what I've said is helping. I've got a couple of videos which will come out over the next week or two, which hopefully will answer more questions. So one of the things I would say, Susan, which probably is the biggest summary of Viking, is I had a Viking cruise, which, like you, by the sound of it, was pushed into next year. So that's March, which is a Venice to Athens cruise. However, based on my experience this past week on Viking, I am actually now looking to do one of those Malta cruises, because my cruise in September was cancelled on Queen Victoria, and the cruises that have come up basically full. The ones that Queen Elizabeth are doing are basically full. They're kind of another around the UK, which I've done loads of those. I'm now looking at one of the Malta cruises. So I've briefed Sarah, who probably doesn't know that, she hasn't looked at the email yet, to look at putting me on one of the Malta, getting on one of the Malta cruises. So hopefully that helps you. I was so impressed with Viking. The absolute highlights, again, I'll just recap, is I liked very much the ships. The ships are a great size, sort of smaller size. The cabins are really nice. One of the things I got a chance to look at, because building on Lou's point, it was lower capacity. So very kindly, someone on the ship, Johan van der Merwe, South African guy with a name like Johan van der Merwe, he could only be South African. He was like a person that a Viking said I should talk to if I wanted any help. They were very kindly to give me his name. So I spoke to him, and he managed to arrange for me to see all of the cabin grades. So I managed to see a veranda and film a veranda, a deluxe veranda, a penthouse veranda, a penthouse mini suite, and the Explorer suite. I was actually in an Explorer suite, so I had seen that one. The only thing we didn't get to see was an owner suite, but I'm guessing very few people are going to want to splash out on an owner suite, so I didn't see that. So I thought I was very impressed with all of the cabins. I had booked a deluxe veranda for my March trip, and what I'm going to do for the Malta trip, I'm not sure what level you've booked in, but I'm going to book, I think, either a penthouse veranda or a deluxe veranda. I really like the size of those. All of those have just a shower. They have a shower, I should say, just a shower. What I liked about the penthouse ones, they were just slightly bigger, but the bathroom was slightly bigger. It had a nice sofa versus the two chairs, and I like the location. I like deck 5. So I really like the ships. Ships are very beautiful. Of course, they're all exactly the same ship. So all the ships are exactly the same, even almost down to the decor. Really nice venue. It's got a very nice size. It's really easy to get around. And if you head up to cabin and think, actually, I want to go and have a drink, and it's not a big palaver to get there. The swimming pool, both the main pool and the infinity pool, really, really nice. We had a couple of nice days, which is unusual with the weather that's been on in the UK. The pool deck opens. Probably my favorite venue, other than that beautiful atrium, which is a great place to meet people, talk to people, as I was mentioning earlier. I really liked the Explorer Lounge. That's a beautiful place to sit, particularly on sea days. The 2 levels, again, another great place. People would meet and chat to people. I love the Winter Garden, and of course the afternoon tea. That was nearly my downfall when it comes to calories. Went 3 times. And he didn't go once, went 3 times, and because the things were different every day, the actual sandwiches and the cakes were different every day, and all the dining venues. The gym itself was also very good. I did use the gym. I liked the gym. It was a nice size. That was something I should mention, is the only thing we had to book, other than the restaurants, we didn't have to book in the main dining room. You had to book to go to the gym and to use the spa area. There was only 10 people allowed in the gym at any one time, but there was never. Whenever I want to go to the gym, I'd go there and I could get in. So very, very impressed with them. And if it helps, I'm looking to book again before my next one, if that helps. We actually touched a little bit on this, is that COVID test. Viking, I think, are the only cruise line that have the laboratory on board their ships. And you have to fill up this little vial with spit, and you have to do it before you've drunk or eaten in the morning. And it really was quite difficult. We all became kind of experts at spitting. Because he's having a glass of champagne on a Sunday morning. Cheers. Brilliant. I have chilled water. So, hello from Chicago. Love the shirt. Good. You like it? Remember, if you're ever interested in t-shirts, I do have various t-shirts which are always at the bottom of the various videos. Here we go. What is the Viking policy if you're vaccinated and yet fail the COVID test while on board? Really good question. So basically, what I've found is that differs a little bit based on the territory that they are sailing in. So there was actually a case that happened on the Bermuda sailing, which I'll touch on, which you might not have seen. I'll talk a little bit about what's happened in the UK. So basically, if you fail the test at the beginning of before we've embarked, you then go and have a second test, which is off-site. So we heard from the previous cruise, someone had again, the result was inconclusive, or I guess probably it was positive, but I don't know that, so I'm just surmising that. They went off the ship to have a follow-up test, I guess a full kind of different type of PCR test, and they were disembarked, which meant, and under the rules in the UK, they would then have had to go home and quarantine at home. And actually what happened, I saw someone being disembarked before we set sail. They were kind of put into a little private taxi and they went off. And I don't know where they went off to. And what happened in Bermuda, for those of you who haven't seen, there was 4 people, I think I'm right saying, in the Bermuda sailing. Is it the Orion in Bermuda? So a couple sharing a cabin tested positive. The contact tracing device indicated they had been in close proximity to another couple. It then worked out they had been in the same taxi together. And so they were all disembarked and they had to go into a 2-week quarantine in Bermuda. And that is the rule in a hotel. And that is the rule of the Bermudan authorities. So whatever the rule is, I think what's important, which is probably linked to your point there, is that what the cruise lines are doing, and Viking have the same policy, is it now, although all cruise lines have to have an isolation and quarantine capability on board, if anyone tests positive, they are actually taken off the ship and they go into quarantine on land. And that's the arrangement that the CDC has required lines to have. It's the arrangement that seems to also be the case with all of the Caribbean sailings, and certainly it's the case in Europe. So we've seen, for example, when some cases have happened, say on Costa or MSC, or whatever, the people have been disembarked into a port where there is an agreement. So in the UK, it's pretty easy because these ships are not sailing far at all. And in fact, we're basically wasting time to get to places. Like, for example, on the Saga trip, we're leaving London Tilbury, going down the Thames and going to Portsmouth as our first stop. I mean, we're going to have to go really slowly and a convoluted way to get there. So, of course, they can very quickly and easily get into ports. So that's the basic process. Now, if it happened during the cruise, I think that would be the same process. People would be isolated and quarantined, and then they would, in the port, head off into isolation. So someone had also asked me, by the way, how is vaccination proved? And again, I'll tell you a specific thing for the UK. In the UK, you had to either show on your NHS app your 2 doses, and they did look to make sure that you'd had 2 doses and the dates of those on the app, or you had to produce a letter. Now, they said the letter from the NHS or the doctor, but what you do in the UK is you can request a letter. You can actually download it off your app. But if you don't have the app for whatever reason, you don't have a smartphone, like my sister's partner has a phone but doesn't have a smartphone. If they were on the cruise, they could have then contacted 119, which is like the NHS helpline. You can do the bookings, and they will send you the letter that you need. So Paul and Carol, I'm trying to make them really jealous, probably because they absolutely love Spirit of Discovery. And again, if you want to watch some Spirit of Discovery stuff, they have some stuff there. And I'm going to make them horribly envious next week, because I know they love the cabin that I'm in next week, and I'll post loads and loads of pictures of them, and they'll hate me, so that's fine. Paul and Carol, I will be seeing, by the way. I think it's Regal. Is it Regal Princess? We were hoping to be on 2 of the same cruises together, but I think we're now only on the Regal Princess, if I remember correctly. So Mike's saying, Mark, let's be on Mark's point. It sounds reassuring procedure-wise, but good Lord, it's like cruising in a medical clinic. It's interesting because I think it does sound a bit like that as I explained it. It didn't actually feel like that once you were there, because I think you just get in the process. But I guess you're right. Some people would find that they wouldn't like that. But it's interesting listening to both how I felt talking to people that I met, but listening sort of earwigging as you do, is I think people felt more reassured, particularly because it was so early on, and particularly in the UK where you've got the Indian variant or the Delta variant. It's now called, spreading relatively fast. I mean, cases up to 10,000 a day, which is obviously tiny versus what it used to be. But so I think people just kind of were almost reassured by the process. But I guess for some people, definitely it's not. For me, there was that balance between being back out there and not getting in the way. But I can see why for some people. TW, let's pick up on this point. So TW account, right? Did you have to stay in a designated bubble of people when on board, for example, from your dining table? No, you didn't have to, as such when you were dining. So what you had to do is you could dine in up to 6. So the rule in the UK is up to 6 people. That's 6 people who can be from different households. So we had dinner one night. There was actually only 5 of us. So there was a couple, Richard and Helen, who actually I know Richard and Helen pretty well, obviously, because they're bloggers, and bloggers have known them for a while. So they're at the table. There was actually a lady from Viking called Carmen. She actually works for Viking in the head office. She actually in their PR department. She happened to be on board, trying out the product. So we got to meet her and asked her to come to dinner. So she joined us, and there was me. And then on other evenings, for example, Richard and Helen sat with other people and people they met. You could certainly, if you were sitting drinking, you could have a drink with people, but you'd have your seat here, you'd have the social distance seats there, and they would be sitting there. So no, you didn't have to stay within a bubble. Everybody wore a contact tracing device, and the idea was also with that distancing of the tables and stuff, you would also be far enough away. So hopefully, if they did get test positive, you wouldn't actually show up because you'd kept your distance from them. But you could certainly, you could certainly sit at a bar and chat to people. You weren't linked. Now, certainly one of the concerns and one of the rules, which was going to be in place on many of these cruises, was you could only dine within your bubble. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when I'm on the Saga trip, how that's interpreted. When I'm on the Britannia trip in 2 weeks, a week after, that's 2 weeks' time. Anyway, a week after the Saga trip, because in their documentation, they currently say that if you want to dine with anybody, you specifically have to link your booking reference. So that may be a slightly different process. That's maybe a rule that they're having specifically, because what Viking were doing is they were following the general. So I can, for example, on land, I can go out with 5 other people that are not within my household. If that's a good idea, it's a separate issue, but I can do that now. And you could do that on the ship. So I'll keep you posted with what happens on Saga. Sarah, this is always a difficult one. Compare Viking Ocean to Seabourn and Silver Sea. Now, this is a really interesting question, because in reality, they are not competitors, because you've got Seabourn and Silver Sea, which are very much in the ultra luxury area, and they would argue they're very different. And Viking are on a kind of a different category, where you would argue that Oceania and Azamara, perhaps some of the celebrity people. It was very interesting. A lot of the people I met on board were coming from things like Region 7 Seas, Seabourn, Silver Sea. So that's a good question. Personally, I found them remarkably similar. In my mind, they had a very similar product in terms of the quality of, in the cabin. If you look at, one of the things I like about Seabourn and Silver Sea is, you're in a premium ultra luxury cabin, because just I can't remember what it's called now, not the tog level, the whatever level, the percentage cotton, Egyptian cotton, whatever, just all that stuff. If you ask for feather pillows, they're kind of duck down feather pillows and not chicken feathers or whatever. The toiletries are very beautiful and clearly markety, and although admittedly on Silver Sea you get a choice of them, and Seabourn you get a choice of them. So just the quality of stuff was good. I would say the food, someone actually asked me when I was away, did I think the food was as good on there? I think it was absolutely of a comparison. I think the food was very, very high level. So I think they compared extremely favorably with them. I mean, their fares are relatively high. They're probably not. When I was looking at September now, well, the prices are kind of a little bit all over the place at the moment for these new cruises. But price-wise, they're not that far away price-wise. But certainly the size of the ship, the quality of the ship, the food, it is relatively comparable. The service was very high. I mean, Seabourn and Silver Sea, I guess, probably do nudge a little bit, because they do have probably the service is just, we had 50% capacity, so we probably had like a Silver Sea Seabourn kind of service, because there was fewer people than they would normally have, so they were able to get to know. I mean, so many people, waiters and stuff, knew my name in the end, by the end of the week, which happens on Silver Sea stuff, and maybe it happens normally on Viking. So I would say they're much closer than I thought they would be. Certainly, if you were to look at 2 itineraries and you were to go on Seabourn and Viking, I think a Seabourn person would be very happy. And certainly, it's very interesting, because I spoke to some people who come from Region 7 Sea, and they were like, we're not sure about this. By the end of the week, they were talking about, the food's really good in here, the service is really good in here. So I think they are pretty close. I don't think they see themselves as competing in that segment, that segment at all. So hopefully that answers it. May not quite have answered. Someone asked me a question on the actual pricing, and I didn't want to talk about the pricing. Lou's saying, I agree, Gary, a bit more value for your money with Viking and Seabourn, very comparable. So I think pretty much saying the same thing. That's good. You do. I mean, Viking is not cheap at all. But I didn't. One of the questions you got on the survey was value for money. Now I put good value for money, because I think Lou might have answered that. Certainly, the price that they're selling out of the UK is significantly lower than normal, like significantly lower. For example, as I mentioned earlier, I went in an Explorer suite for this particular cruise, and that Explorer suite for a week on these UK sailings basically cost me marginally more than my deluxe cabin. So that's the middle veranda cabin, deluxe veranda, middle veranda cabin, is costing me on my trip next year. So certainly, you're seeing that these prices are lower. Definitely, they are lower than they would be. So it's been quite a good thing for them, I guess, because they are obviously attracting lots of people. So process server, I recommend to look for a UK travel agency. It will be so easier for you to provide and get a second-hand smartphone with address set to the UK. Okay, I'm not quite sure of that. I think I might have missed a question, but certainly in terms of travel agents, I think they're making the point about using travel agents, and absolutely, I think I've mentioned many times before is I do all my bookings through a travel agent. I use Sarah Bolton of Travel Counselors. Quite a few people have been on here and asked about travel agents in the US, and they've used a guy called Gary Puck from Red Travel. I've had lots of really nice feedback from that, and I think to the point that Process Server was saying is it does make it so much simpler, particularly at the moment where things are chopping and changing and prices and things are changing. So I know, for example, one of my big things is always about keep an eye on prices. And I've seen quite a few people talk about the travel agents have kept on top of prices and managed to shave off some prices. I can't remember if it was Paul Carroll or some other people had seen some opportunities on pricing because the travel agent had been on top of it. So there we are. John, come back to your question. I had a Queen Mary 2 crossing from New York earlier this month. When Cancel gave me cruise credits, but I haven't been able to find out how long I have to use them. John, really important. Check very carefully. The last time I looked, which is now, because mine's been cancelled, is you had to have used your future cruise credits to have made a booking before the end of this year. It didn't mean you had to have cruised before this year, but you had to have made a booking before the end of this year. Now, with these big raft of cancellations they've done into 2022, I think we'll probably see that changed. So I've got it in my diary now and I'm back. I need to look at that. So double check if you book direct, double check the email, double check the site. I haven't checked it since I've been back. But I know I did get a message from Sarah saying I need to sort of decide what I'm going to do before the end of the year. I think that will get pushed. And again, what's really important is you just have to do it for any of the cruises that are on sale. So now some of the cruise lines had also required you to have sailed by a certain period. I think Royal Caribbean had done that. Whereas with a lot of the Carnival lines, like Carnival group lines, they had just said you had to have made a booking for anything that was on sale. So that is quite a long way. So I hope that's helped there. So Michelle, hi from Indonesia. Hi there from Indonesia. None of your top cruises include those in Asia. Have you done cruises in Asia? What did you think? Yes, I think you're probably referring to the video I did about some of the best cruises in the world. I have done cruising in Asia, but I've mostly done cruising as segments of kind of world voyages. My favorite Asian cruise, to answer your question, is around Japan, which was really quite magical. And that particular cruise I didn't do one that embarked in Japan. I'd actually do one that embarked in Hong Kong. It was a 2-week cruise, but the advantage of doing embarking in Hong Kong is obviously seeing Hong Kong, which I really like. We also got a chance to go to Shanghai, which is another place I really like, and spend some time. We did an overnight in Shanghai. We also touched very briefly into Taiwan, into South Korea, and then did 5 different ports in Japan. So that is my absolute favorite. I have done a few others where we've gone through from Australia up through Asia and across to Malaysia, which is very nice, across to India, and then ending up in Dubai. But that Japan is my favorite. That's on my list to do again. It's on my absolute definite list to do Japan. So Japan is very high on my list of like cruises to do. So what's great about Japan, I think, is as a traveler, certainly an English-speaking traveler, it feels more not threatening is the wrong word. You just worry a bit more because the language is not very familiar. It's harder to interpret the signs, because the actual way it's all Japanese is written, etc. So that was a great thing about going on the cruises. You felt that you would be able to be shepherded a bit through it. In fact, what we discovered actually is, obviously Japanese people are very hospitable. Actually, with a couple of apps and stuff, you can all actually very easily get around. We actually stopped doing cruise line excursions quite quickly and started self-exploring it, and we found that was perfectly and very easy, very easy to do. So one of the questions that I did want to answer, okay, let me answer another keynote question, because I want to talk about, someone asked a question about the Florida and the ruling with the courts and the CDC, so I would like to answer that. So David is asking a question. When we booked Queen Mary 2, Princess and Queen's Grill was sold out. My Cunard agent put us on a wait list for upgrade and said we were 7th on the list. Any idea what our chances are for an upgrade? Cruise is May 2022. Interesting. I'm also May 2022 on a crossing. We're on the same one. I'm on the 8th of May. So if you're on the 8th of May, we will definitely see you there. So sounds like there's some buffering going on. I did notice that my Wi-Fi signal had gone a little bit funny, so maybe that's happening. Sorry about that if it is. So in terms of it's really, really unpredictable. It's hard in terms of the formula. I found it to be very, very erratic. It's really hard to know. One of the things you'll find, though, you're right, is Queen's Grill, Princess Grill, often particularly the crossings, get sold out really quickly. And the real key, though, is that 90 days before, because that's when people will drop out. So if you're going to get upgraded, you normally get a good sense quite a bit of time before. We've been upgraded very few times, although I tend not to choose the upgrade. We got upgraded once on a crossing where you select auto upgrade. We only found out the check-in time, which was probably about 3 or 4 weeks before. I've been upgraded on my short crossing, short trip on the 23rd of July, but we found out like a month ago. So we found out like 2-3 months before. So it's kind of when the final payment stuff is due. In my experience, most of the upgrades, they tend to do based on loyalty. So we have, I think, Diamond or Platinum, whatever it is. So when we booked our short cruise, we had booked a Q3 on Elizabeth, knowing that there was very few cabins above and they probably wouldn't get sold out. So we had a high chance of moving up, which happened. So people are saying it's frozen. I'm just trying to look. It does seem to be buffering a bit. So apologize. So apologize if it is doing that. It's showing it okay here, but I can see over there it's buffering. So hopefully that will pick up. I'm just seeing if it's doing so. I think hopefully it might be. So Dave is saying, "Oh, you're doing the one before us." So you're doing the one just before us, unfortunately. So hopefully it stopped buffering. Just Jeannie is saying, sailing on Avalon Imagery 2. I've been on that ship, so that's a great ship. In May 2022, I watched all your vlogs. Any new suggestions of vlogs coming up the US? Any potential problems and where to get euros? Okay, so you're definitely very well planned if you're doing it in May 2022. In terms of river cruising, I will probably put out some more river cruising before you go. At the moment, I don't have any specific river cruises booked. I'm actually kind of doing on ocean cruising, but I will do some updates on on river cruising, particularly as it heads back out. So I will do. In terms of the US, hopefully by the time you do that, it will be all kind of calm and settled. In fact, even this year, I think for US people flying in, it looks like it's kind of calming down, and there will be that with the use of the passport thing they're doing to upload vaccination details, it looks like it'll be fairly easily. In terms of euros, I mean, you can either get them before you come, or you can actually just take them out of the cash machines, which sometimes not a great rate. So it's sometimes a good idea to get some before you arrive, and don't get them at the airport. That's where you're going to get the worst rate of all. But you could quite easily change dollars once you're in Europe at one of the bureau de change or whatever. You normally get a pretty good rate. So let's have a look. Hopefully, I'm just looking. I can see here on my screen it's a little bit frozen. So hopefully that's not proving to be too much of a problem. I can see the little signal there. The Amy Slayer is saying, I'm thinking about booking a cruise soon. With COVID restrictions in place, it would be fun to book one now. Or do you think I'll get more bang for my buck if I put it off to next year? I would actually say, I will do a much more detailed video about answering that very specific question. I would say if you're keen to go cruising, I would still look at going this year, because what's happening is it's evolving quite quickly. The rules are changing very quickly. So even if you look at the UK, we have one set of rules that will change again pretty dramatically in July, when potentially there will be no masks, there will be no social distancing, dancing will be allowed, and so on. And we're seeing that also in the US, where the CDC is constantly changing the guidance for vaccinated cruises. So you're going to find, certainly if you're booking as you head towards later in the year, I think you will find the things are changing very, very quickly. One of the advantages of booking them now, some things we touched on, is first of all, some of the pricing on these cruises is pretty good, because there are still a lot of people who are nervous about it, a lot of people worried, as you were saying there, around will it be as much fun. So there is a lot of good deals out there. There's a lot of good pricing out there. So you're probably going to get a pretty good deal. As we head into next year, demand, I think, will be much higher, and prices may get a little bit higher. I was listening to a podcast today. It was actually a BBC podcast looking a little bit at the cruising industry, and the industry may have been talking about. We're talking about how they're seeing pricing for 2022 growing very fast. They also think that 2022 is going to be their biggest cruising year ever, based on the way things are trending. So certainly, if you're looking for deals and stuff, this year there's new cruises coming on, because a lot of them are new cruises. We've just seen like Cunard, for example, we were talking about earlier. They've cancelled and had rescheduled all their ships, so they're all new cruises coming on board. So certainly, I would be keen. I mean, I've booked loads and loads of cruises for this as part of this process. But I'm probably a little bit not atypical, because I'm maybe a little bit addicted to cruising. But I would certainly look at it very carefully. The thing I would look at is just make sure that you're comfortable how far afield you want to go. So I've tended to have most of my cruises, certainly as I go back, close to home, and that's quite reassuring, knowing that actually if anything happens, I'm kind of close to home. I know the health system, and I know everything. I'm now maybe saying, well, actually by September, maybe I'm comfortable enough to go further afield and go to Malta. In October, I'm due to go to Greece, and in fact, then at the end of the year, I'm due to go to Antarctica. So what I'm saying is but just think about how comfortable you are going to be. So if you're in the US, for example, do something that's close to home that you're familiar with. Don't necessarily think, okay, for my first cruise, I'm going to head all the way across Europe. And I know lots of people that have cruises, even out of the UK, they've got cruises in Greece that are thinking, well, maybe as I head back, maybe that's certainly something to think about. It's a good show. It seems to again, but get there, get them before you go, as I said. KB's asking a question, which I obviously a lot of people answer the currency question. So yeah, as Peter said, don't get it on board, don't get it at the airport, don't get it on board. Those are the two worst places to absolutely get it. Let's have a look. I'm going to answer this question because it came up a couple of times. Let's talk a little bit about the US. Two big developments in the US, one of which is, as we know, Florida has a rule about businesses not being allowed to ask for proof of vaccination, not vaccination. So what the Royal Caribbean group have done is they've sort of, in some ways, made it almost impossible, not impossible, but extremely unattractive to cruise if you're unvaccinated out of Florida. So in other places, they are having vaccinated cruises. So the ones to Alaska, going out of Seattle, you have to be vaccinated, no question. What they're doing in Florida is, as Walter was saying, is they basically have two sets of rules. They're saying if you're vaccinated and you show proof of vaccination through the check-in process, you can pretty much be able to just have a run of the ship. You're going to be able to do what you want. You're going to have all sorts of venues open to you. You're going to have all sorts of parties. You're going to be able to go to the shows. You're not going to have to wear masks. You're going to be able to just basically have a fantastic time within whatever the rules are. If you don't want to show proof of vaccination, you're either not vaccinated or you don't want to show proof of vaccination, that's fine. You're welcome on board the ship. However, you will then have, I think it's the vaccinated people are going to get it. It's the other way around. It's vaccinated passengers. So vaccinated passengers will have a wristband, which gives them access into everywhere. If you don't have the wristband, i.e. you're not vaccinated or won't prove it, then you're not going to be able to go to certain venues. So certain venues will only be for passengers that are vaccinated. You might find you have to only go to certain of the shows. So they might say, this show is for people who don't have wristbands. You will also have extra costs. So you'll have to have a series of tests, which you will have to cover at your on cost, above the cost of the cruise fare. So they're basically saying you won't have access to all the facilities. or some of the facilities. You won't have access to all of the events. So basically what they're saying is a way of working within the rules, within the regulations, saying, sure, come on board if you're not vaccinated, but we're not going to give you a particularly good experience. I mean, that's my words, not their words. That was going to give an experience. So that's very interesting. Someone asked at the beginning of the question, what the whole deal is, what's happening with the case. Now, as you know, or may not know, is the governor in the US, DeSantis, sued the CDC, saying they had no right to have a conditional sailing order, that they'd overstepped their mark. The initial ruling in the courts was sort of towards the Florida side, saying that they've kind of overstepped the mark. Now that's all going to go through to and froing and whatever, and we'll see where it all settles down. KB, the podcast, someone asked me, what is the podcast? So the podcast is, I can't find your little message now, it's disappeared. The podcast is the Evan Davies one, which is The Bottom Line. So it's the business podcast. It's The Bottom Line. So if anyone wants to go and listen to that, if you go to look for a BBC podcast, it's called The Bottom Line. And I think it was last week's one was around the future of cruising. So we now have run out of time. It's just so many questions. I see there's more and more questions coming in. So we've already run out of time in this hour. I really appreciate everybody joining for this hour. It's so fantastic that so many people have joined. Remember, you can watch it afterwards if you've missed the beginning. Next week, I will be back doing the Saturday podcast as back to normal slot. It'll be the day before I go on the saga Spirit of Discovery. I'll try and make sure if there's any questions that I've got here that I've missed, that I will do them. And you're absolutely right, it goes by so quickly, and I really appreciate people giving up time. So have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you can join me next week when we can talk more on cruising. Take care.